We already mentioned regular gas at a record high. Diesel also all-time high, almost $5.72 per gallon. Some former Olympic gymnasts have a new competition in court. They're taking on the FBI for how it handled the sexual abuse case against convicted sports doctor Larry Nassar.
There's no dispute that FBI agents in 2015 knew that Larry Nassar was accused of molesting gymnasts, but they failed to act, leaving him free to continue to target young women and girls for more than a year. And now gold medalists Simone Biles, Allie Raisman, and Michaela Maroney, and about 90 other claimants are suing the FBI, accusing the agency of failing them.
On no planet is what happened in this case acceptable.
FBI Director Chris Wray, during a Senate hearing last year, Larry Nassar now imprisoned for the rest of his life. Both Michigan State University and USA Gymnastics have also settled with hundreds of victims. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
In hockey's playoffs, two-time defending Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay beat the New York Rangers in Game 4 4-1 to tie that series. I'm Dave Anthony. This is Fox News.
WPTV's First Alert Weather on WSTU is brought to you by Sailfish Roofing, offering excellence, honesty, and integrity in everything they do. Sailfish Roofing, 772-263-ROOF. Community roofing company you can trust. Sailfish Roofing. Now here's WPTV's First Alert meteorologist.
Hey there, everyone. Steve Villanueva here. Once again, scattered storms in the forecast. Some of the storms could produce some flooding rains and some strong gusty winds. Of course, keep that in mind. And in fact, over the next several days, this will be the weather pattern. We basically have an offshore flow in the middle levels of the atmosphere, and that will keep the active weather along the East Coast metro area. So keep those umbrellas with you. Otherwise, we'll see partly cloudy skies with temperatures on the warm side, close to 90 degrees. I'm WPTV First Alert Meteorologist Steve Villanueva for WSTU 1450, Martin County's Heritage Station.
You are listening to WSTU, Stewart, Jensen Beach, Hope Sound, Martin County's Heritage Station.
It's time now for the Casey Ingram Show on WSTU. The opinions expressed are those of the program host and guest and not necessarily those of WSTU. WSTU does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WSTU. It's time to call in with your questions and comments at 220-9788, 220-WSTU. And now, here's Casey Ingram.
Good morning and welcome back on another fabulous Wednesday. Coming to you from Stewart here, WSTU AM 1450. We have a really good show on tap, especially for those of us in Martin County. We're going to be talking about the Rural Lifestyle Comp Plan Amendment that is going to be coming up for vote here at the next commission meeting. But before we do, I always am so grateful for my sponsors. So I want to remind everybody that COVID, unexpected expenses, and illnesses, there are many issues that can cause your successful business to slump deep into the red. We are here to help, and we only get paid if we provide you a workout. Debt restructuring is complicated. We are the negotiator between you and your creditors. Commercial Mortgage has been in the industry of small business corporate finance since 2003. Our focus is on challenging corporate foreclosures, debt restructures, equity, and new debt solutions. These issues are often not easy to see or understand when you run a business and are faced with multifaceted debt challenges that include legal action on various fronts. That's where we come in. We never charge a front fee or a deposit, and we're only paid if we successfully provide you a debt workout. Areas of expertise include hotels, marinas, office buildings, restaurants, apartments, multifamily, condos, golf courses, home builders, land development, including new and repurposed developments. Call Commercial Mortgage at 772-872-6099 or visit them online at commercialmortgagellc.com. Also, everybody, have to remind you, we all had a taste of the wicked storms that came through this past weekend, and it is officially hurricane season, and I cannot stress enough, now is the time to secure your hurricane storage for your boats, and the best place to do that is Indiantown Marina. It's one of South Florida's best boat storage facilities, very well protected hurricane hull, and they're home to many in the cruising community who find their facility ideally situated and user-friendly. Get your hurricane storage today, so when a storm's named, you know you have a place to take your boat. I can tell you from experience, if you wait, once it's named, you're probably not going to find a place anywhere in this county. So give them a call today, 772-631-3272. Make sure your boat is going to be safe and secure. And while it's there, it's a do-it-yourself and full-service boat yard, so you can get all kinds of work done on your boat or work on it yourself. Again, that's Indiantown Marina, 772-631-3272. And finally, the best kept secret in Martin County is the Fish House Art Center. You can look it up online, thefishhouseartcenter.com, before you head out, but you can come by boat, car, stroll the boardwalk, and explore what the best kept secret has to offer. It features local artists, an Airbnb, art gallery, boat charters, marina, craft and creamery, craft beers, wine, and 24 flavors of ice cream. There is literally something there for everybody, and you can also rent paddle boards and bicycles. It's a really fun spot down in the Pocket in Port Salerno. So that is the Fish House Art Center. Today, folks, we have a really important topic, and I'm pleased to have Rick and Rick in the studio. To my right here, immediate right, is Rick Hartman, and between us is Rick Melchiori. Hopefully I said that right.
You
I
did.
probably didn't. Okay.
You got it correct.
Alrighty. So we're going to be talking about the proposed rural lifestyle land use designation. It's coming up for vote again at the Martin County Commission at their next meeting. And it's received a lot of publicity, of course, but it's really something that I think has had a lot of misinformation out there about what that land use designation will mean. And I'll tell you a little bit about the Ricks. They just put together a publication that went through really the history of this type of land use designation. It's been tried before here in the county. It has a lot of benefits, but it always seems to get misconstrued and misused, and for one reason or another, it hasn't went through. But there's a lot of reasons we really should consider this land. I think it's a very positive, especially for conservation and environmental reasons here in Martin County. We're talking about our agricultural lands. There's a lot of it, and we're going to go into really this whole thing as we roll out this hour. But first, I'll let you know, Rick Hartman is president of One Martin. Rick Hartman's family has been a part of the fabric of Martin County since 1883, where cattle ranches and farms were the dominant features of the landscape and the culture of Florida. Rick grew up here, attended Martin County High School, and received a Bachelor of Science degree in agricultural economics from the University of Florida. Broker-owner of Hartman Real Estate, Rick is the managing member of Old River Cattle Company, LLC, and a member of the Florida Cattlemen's Association, where he has served on the Environmental and Private Lands Committee. He has been active in organizations throughout the community, including the Board of Directors of the Martin County Taxpayer Association and the Board of Directors of the Martin County Chamber of Commerce. He is currently Vice President-elect of the Palm City Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. Rick and his wife, Janet, have 3 children and are the proud grandparents of 6 grandchildren. Rick Melchiore, Vice President of One Martin. Since 1990, Rick has invested his engineering expertise, leadership skills, and love of the land in local and regional projects on the Treasure Coast for both established businesses and startup organizations. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Structural Engineering from Michigan State University, go Spartans, and is a registered professional engineer in the state of Florida. Currently, Rick is the General Manager for Becker Holding Corporation, responsible for the overall operations for agribusiness involved in the citrus, ornamental landscape, and land development industries. Becker represents 3 generations of family-owned citrus businesses. In 2002, it converted a citrus grove in Martin County to a state-of-the-art tree farm and nursery that now employs, is it 60 people?
Yeah, we have about 60, 70 employees.
My paper cut off just the edge of my document here. Rick and his wife, Nancy, have been married for 22 years and have one son who's currently studying mechanical engineering at the University of Florida. So both Ricks, I appreciate you coming in here today. If you folks go to One Martin, you can find this entire document we're going to be talking about today, this publication. But I'm going to let you start, either one of you, on why you put this publication together, and we'll go through it piece by piece.
You or me?
I'll go first.
Rick Hartman.
The reason we put this together is because we saw this new land use going the way several other land uses have went. And over the last 20 years that Martin County's had opportunities to really do some land uses to preserve land. And every time somebody tries something, it gets swallowed up in this don't Browardize us, or don't Miami-Dade us, or don't, that kind of stuff. And we just couldn't let that happen, so we went back in history and highlighted some things that have gone on. When people start talking about conservation easements and preserving land, it just sparked it in me and One Martin. One Martin is an organization where most of them are landowners and landholders in Martin County that do business in Martin County. Our position is we don't endorse a project. We endorse a concept or a land plan, but we don't endorse a project. Personally, and Rick knows this, that I don't like destiny, because to me it's turning southern Martin County into a playground for the ultra wealthy. And I'm more interested in preserving ground and making housing for my children and grandchildren. So we've got a dichotomy there. So we're not endorsing, One Martin is not endorsing the project itself. We're endorsing the concept of, if you've got a big piece of ground, that you ought to be able to do something with it. And if you want to do something unique and preserve ground, then we as a county ought to look at it favorably, because if we're going to make Martin County what it needs to be, we need to preserve some of this ground and lock it up so it's going to be here forever. And that's my problem. If you look at people that have fought anything that comes on, they always talk about preservation of land, and there's been several opportunities. Harmony is one, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it was. They were willing to preserve 50% of it, and everybody came unglued. If you look at what Coventry tried to do on a Becker piece in southern Martin County, they were going to, and people don't realize this, but those groves down there off of Ridge Road were irrigated and could be irrigated out of the C-44 canal. So what Coventry was talking about was bring water out of the C-44 canal, filter it through a marsh at the southern end of their property, and put it back in the Loxahatchee. That's a win-win for everybody. The Loxahatchee needed fresh water, and that was an opportunity to do it. And several politicians got filleted for that. So that's my impetus, is to bring to light that this is we're about the environment. We're not about no growth, and that's the difference between some of us and others. Is that I'm about the environment, and it's not a growth issue, because with 1,000 people a day moving to Florida, we're going to get some of them.
And you cover that, I know, in this publication that you put out, and it's a 6-piece article that is out there, and it talks about the amount of growth in Martin County, and we'll get into that as well. But I think one of the things I looked at in the first, one of the reiterations of this amendment that was talked about was about 2002. And at that time, I think that they said the Treasure Coast was going to grow by 250,000 people by 2030. And I just looked at the population statistics yesterday, and it's already grown by over 200,000. So we're well past that projection, as far as if you look at how many on a percentage basis, we're gonna be beyond that by 2030. So as you said, growth, it's coming. People are moving here, 1,000 people a day. I want to back up 1 second. We're talking about the designation, the land rural lifestyle amendment that will be brought up at the commission next week, but it's brought up in conjunction with what you said, Destiny or Atlantic Fields. And Rick Melchiore, you were here a few weeks ago.
Correct.
When it was ahead of the commission meeting vote. And really that vote just was put off at this juncture, and that's where it's coming back up. But it goes hand in hand. And this particular project, we discussed it in depth. Tell us how much land through this land use designation is preserved for conservation, and how is that preserved?
So with our project, the overall land area, if you look at it in totality, it's about 2,300, 2,400 acres. 1,500 of it is the Polo Club, which is the area that's going to be developed. The other 800 acres comes from our tree farm. And our tree farm will be put into a permanent agricultural easement or conservation easement. There's been a lot of discussion about who should sign that easement. So we did make an amendment, or a change to the amendment, that requires 3 signatures. One is the landowner, one is the county. The third would be a nonprofit or a 501c3 that is tasked with conservation land. And we reached out to Conservation Florida. They've been around since 1990. Their mission is to preserve agricultural properties, other conservation, easements and things like that, and they've agreed to co-sign. So we're actually working through the easement language as we speak, which will get presented to the county, assuming we get approved. So those would be the three parties, and that 800-acre tree farm would be the actual preservation.
So for anything to ever be done besides the preservation of that land, those three parties would have to agree.
Correct. If anything other than bona fide agriculture was to be done on the property, those three parties would have to come together in agreement, and obviously the chances of that are pretty much slim or none.
It's pretty much slim or none. If those three parties actually came together, they would, I would think, be a very good reason. So, and that's the important part about it as well, is how much of it is in conservation. It's going to help us environmentally, and who takes care of that land in perpetuity.
So that's the other aspect of this amendment I think that's very important, is the landowner, we don't transfer this land to the county. It remains in our ownership, and we're responsible for maintenance. And unlike a lot of the other lands that the county acquires, budgetary funds for maintenance of these properties just isn't there. I mean, there's other priorities that the county has to deal with. So what ends up happening is these lands are not maintained, and all of a sudden they're overgrown, et cetera. And when they have to go try to maintain it, it's an enormous cost to the county. So this amendment requires us as the landowner to maintain that property in good working condition.
Previously, a lot of the land that has been brought in for conservation in Martin County, we've had our half-cent sales tax, and they go out and they purchase the land, and then the county is responsible for maintaining that. This here, and I want you to go into the amendment itself a little bit more, takes a lot of land. Again, you said that the landowner has to take care of that in perpetuity.
Correct.
But how much land on a minimum amount?
So if you're, first of all, to be able to utilize the amendment or to apply to have that land use designated on your property, you have to have a minimum of 1,000 acres. The amendment itself specifies that if you want a density increase, then you have to set aside at least 50% of whatever your land area is. So the presumption is if you have 1,000 acres, it's a minimum of 500 acres. In our case, it's 1,500. We have 1,500, so it's a minimum of 750 acres. So and that's the only way you can get a density increase. Otherwise, the densities remain as is. And then again, because we're setting that land aside, we're putting into a conservation easement, but we are maintaining ownership. It's our responsibility to cover all the costs for maintaining that land and keeping it in good working condition.
And that land, again, can be used for agricultural purposes.
Correct.
Or just plain old conservation.
Correct. I mean, in our case, it's bona fide agriculture because that's our tree farm, so it'll just maintain as a tree farm.
So in layman's terms, you have this land right now that has, let's say, 1 unit for 20 acres.
Correct.
You add density to half of it, and the other half is not going to be developed. There's not going to be a home built on it. It'll be agriculture or environmental.
I mean, once that land goes into conservation easement, basically all of the development rights have been removed. The only thing we're able to do is bona fide agriculture. That's pretty well defined by Florida Department of Agriculture. So that land is pretty much going to be as it is. So when you're driving up 95, you will see a tree farm for the foreseeable future.
So if you think about that, folks, that's a minimum of 500 acres on these developments. We're not talking about properties that are already 20 acres or 100 acres. They got to be a minimum of the 1,000 acres. If you think about that, half of that is just going to be environmental conservation or agriculture. It's never going to be anything else. There's not going to be a one home for 20 acres or ever be able to be split down the road. You think about that, you don't know what commissions will be made up in the future. So even at the density of 1 unit per 20 acres, what if you have a different commission 30 years from now and they decide they're going to break it up to, 2-acre parcels or what have you? That's just not going to happen with
Casey,
this.
I think that's a really good point, because the county is required at some point in time to move the urban service district. They have to accommodate growth. That's required by state law. So at some point in time, these properties that are adjacent to the urban service district are going to be encompassed in the urban service district. So for example, the Polo Club, we're partly in the secondary urban service district. So we would be a prime candidate for ultimately moving into the urban service district. Well, at that case, we're going to get 3 units to the acre. So instead of 317 units out there, there's going to be 4,500 units. And there is no preservation with that.
There is no preservation, so in the future there could be a lot more development where this is again in perpetuity. Half of that land will be in a conservation easement or agriculture. Rick, I want to go back to the history a little bit, because when I read this article that you guys put together, really this started back in the 60s and 70s. So I'm going to let you go ahead and talk about that.
in the 60s and 70s, I wasn't paying much attention to it, other than my dad was a real estate broker as well, and having conversations with him. I wish all these people would quit moving here. I mean, I had that conversation with my dad all the time, and he said, but they're going to keep coming, and we just got to figure out how to work with it. My dad was one of the people that really raised money to buy beaches to protect and give us some beaches, and so I've been involved in this a long time, and I've put probably 10,000 in my real estate career, probably 10,000 acres under conservation easements,
Wow.
or the state has bought them. And we're working on one in Okeechobee now that's 950 acres. It's going to be a rural and family lands project, which keeps it in bona fide ag. Basically the state buys their, just like Rick's talking about, they buy the development rights off of the rancher. The rancher, he can keep ranching, he can keep farming. It's going to be bona fide ag. And the important thing about that to me is that keeping people like Becker's on there. That's a tree farm today, but in the future, if they want to grow vegetables or they want to grow some kind of crop, they can. By the UN's numbers, by the year 2050, we need to increase our food supply in the United States or in the world by 50%. So when you have somebody like the district or the county buy a piece or acquire a piece that they're going to own, they have to manage it, but they don't know how to farm, and they're not going to farm, and
Right.
It's not set up for farming. So all this good ground that we end up with the state owning or the feds owning or an agency like the district owns, we need to protect our food supply. To me, it's a food security issue. So if you go back to earlier times when we did our comp plan, we did 1 unit per 20 acres, and that sounded like a good idea at the time. And if you want to limit growth and stop growth, that is a good idea, because 20 acres is not viable to grow food.
farm,
It's
right.
really not. And so my first real introduction to Martin County and trying to do things was the Valley Area Amendment. And at the time, the 1,000 Friends of Florida had it on their website that clustering was the ideal way to go. And so when they were hearing that, I remember going to the county commission meeting and took a snapshot off of the 1,000 Friends of Florida website that, okay, this is what they support. And I showed it to the county commissioners, and if you check the next morning, it was gone.
Wow.
So everywhere in the state of Florida and most of the United States, clustering is a good thing, all except Martin County. And I'll go one step further that people really get their hair on fire, is that wetland mitigation. There's 67 counties in Florida. There's only one county that does not allow wetland mitigation. And we're probably getting off topic, but this is one of my really hot spots, is that we don't want to expand the urban service boundary, and we want to protect wetlands. And my contention is, if you've got a quarter-acre wetland or a half-acre wetland that's non-functioning, is cut off from everything else, it's really not benefiting anybody. It's mostly growing mosquitoes that the county gets to go spray to kill the mosquitoes. So if we allow mitigation, then they can create a better wetland somewhere else that's functional and works. That's off topic, but it's part of the puzzle of how to increase our densities inside the urban service district before we have to move them. And one of my first real eye openers was, I was meeting with an attorney and a landowner, and they were talking about a piece of ground that's in the southern part of the county, and I said, there's not much you can do with it. And the attorney said, and the owner said, this is an infill project to us. And I said, infill project? There's nothing around it. And they pulled up a nighttime aerial of Florida. And so here's all the lights coming up from Palm Beach County, and here's all the lights coming down from St. Lucie County, and here's this dark spot, which is Martin County, which I think is really cool. And I still thought that was pretty cool. And the attorney said, the bad part about this is at some point in the future, some landowner is going to go to the legislature, is what Rick talked about, is they're going to go to the legislature, and the legislature is going to say, no more. These two counties are really crowded, and you're going to have to do this, and this is for the benefit of the people of the state of Florida. So I think this land use amendment gives us a chance to thwart some of that we can have this land locked up. Kiplinger's is the Newfield project is
Right.
another one. Okay, they're going to develop some, but they're going to lock down 3,000 acres, 2,500 acres that they're going to lock down. That's going to be preserved. And as a kid, I hunted all of that and played in that and just had a ball with it. So anytime we can, and I wish nobody else moved to Martin County. I really do. I wish, and I wish most of the people would leave. We go back to 50,000 people like it was when I was a kid. That's what I really wish. But let's get our head out of her. And
it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Reality.
So anytime somebody comes in with a land use amendment that says we're going to lock up some of this stuff, and like Beckers are doing, there'll be 3 people on that conservation easement. It runs with the land, and they got to get all 3 of them to sign off on. So anytime you can lock down a piece like that, I'm all for it. Like Harmony, their first iteration was preserve 50% of it, get 3 people on the deed. You got it locked down. And if you look where Harmony was, tied in with Palmar, and how important what we could have had would have been really beneficial. The scary part, last Monday, they had the announcement for Newfield and who's going to be the new developer. And one of our commissioners said, this is really great because they're going to preserve 70%. Well, most land, the Kiplinger family has been here a long time. They bought that land a long time ago. They've got a really cheap basis in it.
Right.
So they can do that, but most people can't do that. So 70%, that seems kind of steep to me, and I don't want that to be. And the commissioner said this should be our goal, that everybody does that. Well, that's a little bit too far.
50%'s a lot already.
50%'s a lot already, and if a guy's, that's negotiation. If it's really good prime land that could be farmed and produce food, or something that really ties into our ecosystem for water, then we need to be able to negotiate that maybe it's 40% rather than 70%. And I don't know that number. I'm not a land planner, but those are the things that we've missed in this county in years past, that people wanted to use the environment as an excuse for no growth, and that really irritates me. And I'm on a soapbox right now, I apologize. What really irritates me is when people start this, and they don't ever talk about planning for their kids. And if you notice, most of the people that come to the podium and really chastise our commissioners, they don't talk about future generations. They're talking about now. They're talking about nobody moving here. They like it the way it is. It's like it was when I moved here. Well, if I was to make that organization, these people they'd all have to leave. And so I know growth is coming, and I applaud what Beckers is doing to lock up some of this. I applaud the Kiplinger family, because it's coming, and we just have to be smart about it.
Growth is coming, Rick, and I want to reiterate something you said, because it really caught my attention. And the fact is that when the land is put into this 50%, whether it's agricultural or conservation easement, but a lot of it's already agricultural land, so it's agricultural, the ability to use that land for agriculture is absolutely important. And our world population is growing. I 100% believe you, and you said we have to be producing 50% more. We have to think about that. If we're just going to put this into strict conservation that a state or the county or federal government runs, it's not going to be farmland. It's nothing.
And I think, Rick made a really good point on the set-asides. And, for us, we're putting, 50% of our overall land is going into conservation, but another 70% of the project site is in open space. Wow. And to do that, these projects have to they're pretty high quality projects to be able to do that. And they're going to generate a significant tax base for the county. And that's money that the county can use for a lot of other things, obviously infrastructure and all of those type of things. But, you can look at now having some funds to maintain some of the lands that the county currently has, or putting it into workforce housing or whatever, they may want to do with that money. But we're going to generate probably $30 to $40 million in additional tax revenue. That's
just huge.
Yeah, and that gives the county some latitude to be able to do some things that they may not otherwise be able to do.
Well, and they always need money, whether it's for roads or infrastructure, what have you. But
the purchase price is usually the cheapest part of a piece of ground, and so the state agencies have bought land in Martin County and other places in the state. And I've had the pleasure and the opportunity to lease some of that to run cows on it, and the fight you go with these agencies, and the county is part of one of them, to manage them and put them back in a productive state is a nightmare. And right now, one of the agencies just got a board that doesn't understand agriculture at all. It doesn't understand that there's a symbiotic relationship between, in my case, cows and wildlife. And if they would work with us and other lessees, if they would work with us to manage this property and take it off of their, take that management issue off of their back, we can keep these lands productive. Because if people don't understand, in Florida, you don't just buy a piece of land and let it sit. You can't do that. Not just Florida, anywhere. You can't. We're past that.
Right.
We're past it. You just leave it sit and it'll be fine. And in Florida, I could name off probably 10 non-native invasive species that if you leave it sit, they will take it over, and you can't walk through it. The only thing to get through it would be a hog, and we don't want wild hogs. But the deer population goes down, the turkey population goes down, the quail populations goes down. And when they allow one of their lessees to manage it and to get rid of the Brazilian peppers and to do better with water sources for the cattle, the deer come too, and the turkeys come, and so the wildlife comes back. And that's the hard part that I have with state agencies owning land. Like I say, I feel fortunate that I've got to lease it, and I'm going to do the best I can to maintain it and put it in the most productive state I can, but I wish they'd be more cooperative. So in my opinion, I hope state and agencies buy not one more acre. If they want to put a conservation easement on it and keep that landowner on there that's going to manage it like they have for the last 100 years, I'm all about that.
That's truly conserving Florida, by the way. I mean, that's truly conservation.
That's how you conserve Florida.
That's how you conserve Florida.
Rick Melchiore, let's go into the amendment a little bit more. Sure. It's 1,000-acre parcels. Is that 1,000 acres anywhere in the county, or does it have to be contiguous to the?
There's actually what we did was initially it was proposed for the entire county. We got a lot of feedback, and that was maybe too much. So what we did was we went back with our planners and talked to everybody and decided. We came up with, which is in the amendment as a supplemental memo, that basically says you have to be adjacent to an urban service district, and that restricts it down significantly. There's probably realistically about 10,000-12,000 acres in those size tracts that would be able to realistically apply for the land use. A majority of those, especially the ones in the northern county, are already either working cattle ranches or something like that would be very unlikely to be transitioned. There are some properties. Harmony would be one to be able to take advantage of it. There's a proposed golf development, 3 Lakes, that would be able to take advantage of it. Johnny Whitworth's property next to us would be able to take advantage of it, and that's probably one of the highest targets for acquisition in the state of Florida. So that property, based on its ability its location with the headwaters. So that in itself kind of restricted it down. Obviously, it's the commission's decision on which direction they want to go.
Once a property is designated, let's say this does pass, the property that's now contiguous to it, does it become eligible to become part of,
no.
If it's 1,000 acres?
No, it has to be adjacent to an urban service district if that's the direction they choose to go.
That's just it. So there's no leapfrogging necessarily.
So if you're on the other side of Bridge Road, if we get approved and you're on adjacent to us on the other side of Bridge Road, that does not allow you to do the same thing.
So that actually, it's a little disappointing to me, honestly, that it's limited that much, and that's just my own personal opinion. But because I really feel that this 50% designation is huge for conservation of our properties and agricultural properties. You mentioned in your article a little bit about what if Indiantown is annexing farmland.
You stole the words right out. I was going to bring that up.
I was saying, I don't think that's a what about. I think that's just an
That's
inevitable
When.
solution, right?
And so most of the times Martin County shoots their own self in the foot because we listen to the naysayers, and what spurred Martin County, Indiantown, to incorporate was a cogen project out there that would have been a great benefit for Indiantown, and they, some of our no growth people just they beat the bandwagon till it went away.
Strangled it,
And so
right.
you got a community out there of what, 12,000 people,
About that.
and they've generated a lot of tax income for Martin County, and they never got anything. They've always been treated as a stepchild, and they had enough. And so now we've got a community sitting in the middle of out in the western part of the county that when they decide to grow, and I don't know whether they will. I'm not on the board. I don't have any of the
Probably
politics. but
inevitable if you look at
it will
Florida
be
and other areas.
It will be inevitable. I mean, and it's just sad that it had to happen that way.
And I think the sad part, and I think what the articles kind of highlight, and it's been a frustration of our part, is that everybody says, well, we got to stop and study this. Well, we've studied this for 25 years.
I was just going to ask you to go into that because this has been studied, and let's talk about that a little bit.
When we started drafting the amendments, we went back and looked at all of these old studies and tried to pick some of the benefits of these old studies that at the time everybody seemed to be coming to agreements, but then the no growthers, not the slow growthers, got involved and would the email campaigns, et cetera, and all of a sudden things stopped again. So we tried to say, okay, well, what are the benefits of those things? What can we do, based on that 25 years worth of studying it? How can we, come up with something that sort of ties some of that stuff together, which is basically where we ended up.
And
I was part of the Friends of Martin County.
Okay.
And Tom Hurley, who is Rick's boss, was one of the real drivers behind that. And we met, I forget how long, but a long time we met, and Mary Dawson did a great job with it. We thought, because we had people from the University of Florida come down there, land planning, we had 1,000 Friends of Florida people there. We thought everybody, and there's probably 100 people coming every time, and we thought we had something crafted that everybody would work. And so a select group of the Friends of Martin County met to be able to craft a document, and it was killed, that small group with the no-growthers.
And this was back in 2002, right? It said you invited scientists from the University of Florida's Institute of Food and Agricultural Science Division to present environmentally sound alternatives. And really what it came up is the clustering of homes in a development should be permitted to maximize preservation of environmentally sensitive land and improve water flow. That's what your group came up with.
Yeah.
It's not the only group, right? I mean, this is not the
there's
only
been
study.
several. And actually, at one point, I forget if it was the county, but they hired Gladding Jackson, which is probably one of the biggest planning firms in the state. And they came in and you end up with the same results. And it's not coincidental that they're coming up with the same results because, 66 other counties are coming up with these same results. I mean, there's a pretty sound planning principles.
Well, Governor Bush, Jeb Bush, in 2004 had a rural land subcommittee, correct? And that was 37 members that really came up with the same conclusion.
And Ken Pruitt did the same thing. And Ken Pruitt's probably one of the best people that the Treasure Coast has ever produced. I mean, he is truly a politician that was all about the good of the people, not just him and not just one party, but truly who was best for what was best for us.
The area here in
the area
the land,
and,
Florida,
and,
right?
And we canned every one of them. The other thing is that what this amendment is, we haven't studied it long enough. We haven't done enough with it. We've not had it all workshopped and all this kind of stuff. Well, I think I forget the year, but one year we went into a no growth group, and in the first meeting, they just about rewrote the comp plan amendment. I mean, the comp plan.
Yeah, that was back in 2012.
2012, and we all about rewrote it. But there were no public meetings. There was no workshop. There was no nothing. And out of that, it probably cost us the county somewhere between $20 and $40 million. Lawsuits that went after that.
After those amendments.
Yeah, those amendments just killed us.
Folks, if you go to itsonemartin.com, you'll see the whole series, and the series that they put out really talks about these issues that Rick just spoke about. It goes into the history of all the times that this idea for this comp plan amendment has already been studied. It's already been proven and shown that this is really the best way to handle the growth in Florida and still conserve our lands and keep Florida special the way it is. So it amazed me how many times this has been studied, and it just, like you said, the signs come out, don't Miami my Martin, and don't Browardize us, and that's all of a sudden it seems like the facts are just washed away.
Everybody seems to want to forget that. Everybody, it's not something new. It's something that's been tried multiple times in multiple jurisdictions. It's been done. It's been studied to death in Martin County.
Right.
Maybe at some point in time we have to look at trying to take some action here versus just pretending that we're going to study it.
Well, Patrick Hayes is probably my favorite politician. He didn't want to run for county commission, but he had a vision, and Patrick really got on board. And so Patrick's idea, that really key to Patrick, was to reconnect the Loxahatchee, because somewhere along Bridge Road the water diverts and goes either to the Loxahatchee or goes to the South Fork.
Okay.
And so Patrick's whole deal was to figure out where that was and how to use land development practices and policies to reconnect those two tributaries. And people, and he was a no-growther. I mean, he was absolutely, he's like me, he didn't want anybody moving there either. But he understands that you got a horse trade to make all this happen. And the no-growthers turned on him and ate him up and kicked him to the curb. And to me, that's what we do in Martin County. If the people talk about how we have no tolerance in America today. Well, Martin County we lead the way in a lot of things, and we led the way in no tolerance. And if you don't agree with us, you're no good. And him and Mary Dawson just got crucified, which was terrible. And Mary Dawson was one that walked down Martin Downs Boulevard carrying a coffin when she was a commissioner because she didn't want Martin Downs to be developed. Well, there's a lot of people in Martin County today tell you Martin Downs is pretty nice.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We can go about the Indian Street Bridge as well. It's another one of those issues. But Rick, tell me a little bit about what farmers were told. This comp plan amendment, the comp plan was designed in the early 80s, 82, 83, right around in there. And that is where it became part of our plan that farmlands were 1 unit per 20 acres if they weren't within the urban service boundary. Tell us what farmers understood at that time, and they were farming their land. And
absolutely, and those were back in the heydays of citrus, and everybody was making money. So when the comp plan was initially put in place, it was sort of like, yeah, whatever, that's great, nothing really mattered. It's rather ironic, but Maggie Urchella sat with Mr. Becker at the time and said, well, this is a placeholder. Don't worry about the 1 per 20. It's a placeholder. Ultimately, as growth develops, then, it'll change over course of time. And, then obviously that became not a placeholder. It became a hard line in the sand. And it needs to be a placeholder to some extent. I mean, is there a value for 1 per 20 somewhere out? Probably is. But, adjacent to the urban service district, no, it really doesn't make sense. So, I think we're at a time now that placeholder is up, and we have to start thinking about what we're going to do with these lands now.
And at the end of the day, too, you got to talk about property rights. We're primarily a Republican conservative county, and we are very much concerned about people's property rights. And when you talk about that, it was told to the farmers it's going to be a placeholder. Times have changed.
Absolutely.
Citrus canker, that you can't do the same things on your land anymore that you once could. So, the way to make a living has changed. It's curtailed, and this is a way for farmers to still be able to use their land and be able to utilize it.
And unfortunately, I think what you're seeing, and I'm sure Rick will back this up, but what happens with ag owners, farmers, is that they end up having to sell off parts of their land to be able to pay for, whatever it's taxes, state taxes, et cetera, especially generational farms. If all of a sudden, you've got a piece of land that you've owned in the family for 3 or 4 generations, the next generation's got to sell a portion of it just to pay the estate taxes. And ultimately, who are they going to sell to? I mean,
That's right.
Sooner or later, you're going to sell to somebody that's got to have a better use for the land. Otherwise, they're not going to get anything for it.
It is something Williamson said it'd be the ultimate crop, which is rooftops. Yeah. And we need to figure out how to stop that. And our comp plan does recognize TDRs, but we've never TDRs, transfer of development rights, but we've never fleshed that out. And there are ranches and farms in this county that have been since the 40s and before. Mm-hmm. And it'll be a cold day in hell before they ever sell. But you don't know what's going to happen when these generations start. The Addams family is one. You get enough people in the family that you have to do something, because some of them don't want to run a ranch anymore.
Right.
They're looking for a higher and best use or another use for it. And so if we could institute to transfer development rights, would do more to preserve ground in Martin County than anything else I can think of. There are several ranches in this. We have one ranch in this county, just so people know. He's in the top 20 of all ranches in the United States.
Wow.
And cow herd.
Okay.
There's 7 of those in the state of Florida. No, there's 9 of those in the state of Florida that are the top 20 cow herds in the United States. And so what those people would love to be able to do, and in some counties they can, and we should do it here, that if you can sell those development rights off and you can pay off other parts of the family that don't want to be in ranching, then you can keep ranching and doing what you've done for generations. Ranching is not an easy livelihood. And so some people don't want to do it, and I understand that, and those families understand that. But being able to transfer the development rights off and bringing them in where we have higher intensity in here, and none of us like it, we don't want this more intense. But if people are going to move here, we need to figure out how to accommodate them.
Well, and you're trying to give these farmers and ranchers the ability to monetize their asset, but be able to keep farming.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and that's the biggest key to all of this.
It is the biggest key, and in perpetuity. This
Right.
is the thing. It's not down the road. It's not going to be
perpetuity.
re-legislated and rezoned or anything like that. This is
Exactly.
going to protect our lands. 50% of that sale will protect and conserve our lands, and it's huge. And I wish people would take that one thing with them, that we are conserving more land this way.
I mean, you think about,
Than not.
they wanted to propose a half-cent sales tax.
Right.
And whether that gets to the ballot or not, time will tell. But as opposed to doing that, if you look at what we're trying to accomplish here with the land use changes, that's free. And it's got zero cost to the county. It has zero maintenance costs long-term, as opposed to a half-cent sales tax where the county's going to go out and buy 800 acres somewhere, and then, as Rick said, it's going to be Brazilian peppers or Australian pines or something in 10 years, and nobody's going to be able to use it anyways.
And Rick, you do a lot of farming out there, and you have a lot of ranch land. You see that this really is happening, and it's something that doesn't get spoken a lot is about the native species that's taking over the land. As you just said, if you just let it go.
Non-native.
I wish it was native species. Thank you, Rick. Yes. Casey, that's
as
good.
As a kid, I remember my dad bringing home some Brazilian pepper. It was Florida holly is what we called it. We were just so excited we were going to have that. And now you can't, if you drive down 714, you can't see anything except Brazilian pepper. And so if you can keep that rancher on there, he knows that if he has a bad infestation of Brazilian peppers, it's not productive land, so they do a good job of it. I've had some governing board members that I've showed them on district property where we pushed peppers and planted the grass back, and it's beautiful, and it takes money to do that, and somebody that wants to do it.
Right.
And the county, God bless the county, God bless the district, they got tight budgets, they can't do it, and they don't understand how to manage that land.
Well, and I think, when people say you got to go spend money, I don't think people understand exactly how much money that is, because even if it's mildly infested, you're looking at $500 to $1,000 an acre to get somebody in there to clear it and burn it and get it that's minimum per acre.
Yeah. And you got to realize that underneath the Brazilian pepper, there's nothing grows except maybe soda apples, because the Brazilian pepper roots put out a toxin that kills all the other plants underneath it.
Oh, wow.
So there's nothing, literally nothing growing underneath it. So if we have a big rain or hurricane and all that water hits that bare ground, that washes off into our streams, our canals, our ditches, our rivers, and everything. And so you're a lot better off to have grass growing than some kind of ground cover rather than a Brazilian pepper.
As that could spread, and obviously it cankers the entire landscape. Tell us a little bit about Broward County. In one of your parts here in the series that you wrote, you talked about Broward County. It's a charter county because at the time, way back when, I'm going to say maybe 60s, maybe 50s, they also wanted to be controlling their growth. So I don't know which one of you wrote that part, but
They were very similar to Martin County at the time. I think the purpose of becoming a charter government was basically to have that really tight control. I think the article mentions it's kind of a nuanced term, being charter versus non-charter, but ultimately what happened there is you see different commission comes in and they start changing the rules, and then finally somebody goes to the state. And the state comes in at that point and said, okay, enough's enough. You've got to do things. And at that, what they did there is they basically said every piece of land in Martin County has to be incorporated, or excuse me, in Broward County. So now instead of, one governing agency sort of controlling things, now you've got 40 municipalities that can do whatever they want. And, in Martin County, we're blessed right now because we've got sort of, basically 3 governments that can kind of control things. Martin County obviously being the largest one. And if they start planning properly and start, allowing some of these things to move forward, we can ensure that we don't end up like that. But if we don't, then what's going to happen is, somebody's going to carve out another municipalities, or the state, ultimately somebody's going to go to the state and say, look, the residential capacity needs are there. I mean, the county to the north, the county to the south, there's nowhere to go. And the state will have to come in and say, okay, you guys, we're either going to incorporate another area, we're going to, arbitrarily move your urban service district and grant certain densities. I mean, and that's, we're trying to do things to prevent that.
So we really need to look at these amendments and what this particular amendment's going to do to preserve Martin County and conserve Martin County. Rick, can you go back and talk a little bit more about the Valliere Amendment, the lawsuit that came from that, and what happened, the outcome of that lawsuit?
The Valliere Amendment was to put it, codify that you could do clustering. And so what that said was, I think it was, it's been so long ago, I think it was that you had to have 1,000 acres there again.
I think it was a little bit less. I think that was 500.
Was it 500?
Yeah.
I thought they started at 5 and we ended up it could be. I can't remember, but it's been long enough ago. And the rest of the land would be in preservation or preserved, or be a conservation easement on it. And there were several ways to do that. Was to if you wanted to, you could use it as what we call today CSAs, communities. Community Service Agriculture.
CRA or CSA?
No, CSA.
CSA.
Community Service Agriculture, I think it's what it is.
Okay.
Where they have small plots where you can grow your own food and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And so you could have done that, or you could rent it out to somebody to put cows on, and that kind of thing, which really makes perfect sense to me. That if you're going to have 100 homes in there, you all come in there through one gate, and you've got all this land surrounding you, and if a person next to you, the landowner next to you, does it, then he butts up to you, and you've got a real wildlife corridor. Rather than these 20-acre ranchettes, that was my goal, was to try to get that passed, to break up the 20-acre ranchettes,
right,
where you have no wildlife corridor, you have no interconnectivity, and that's what people need to get through. We're trying to get connectivity, and I forgot the law. There was a lawsuit.
Well, there were several lawsuits during the process. I'm with the Valliere Amendment. I think the biggest sort of downfall with the Valliere Amendment was the fact that there was no real bonus for doing it. I mean, you were allowed to cluster your units. There was no density increases or anything like that. The preservation had to be done on the parcel that was being developed versus offsite. So you really didn't get, the benefits of being able to, like for example, for us being able to do the tree farm in lieu of, having to do it on site and things like that.
Right.
So, there was a lot of lawsuits stemming from the 2012 changes.
Right.
And that was, I think obviously the Lake Point was probably the biggest one that came out of that ultimately. And I think the counties, Rick's right. I mean, the counties cost them somewhere between probably $30 and $50 million, or $30 and $40 million in the long term.
But it wasn't just that one. It was the smaller ones that, the intersection of I-95 and 714. They took away their highway transit,
right, and there was a lot
land
of
use. So those guys sued. They got it back.
Right.
And there was a lot of little.
The lawsuits ended up, yes.
Yeah.
They ended up losing the lawsuits. The county did with the changes
lost
that
them
they
and
made.
they got it back.
There was kind of some really nuanced things in there. Like, for example, if an ag owner wanted to change from, if we wanted to change from a tree farm to vegetables, well, there was this language that said you had to bring it back to its original condition, which means, what, if I go back to an aerial in 1930s, I mean, and so
You never
might
will.
be good.
Right, you can't
Right.
do that.
You just
So-
can't anymore.
So that's stemmed a lot of the lawsuits over the language, just to get it rectified.
We only have a couple minutes left. And, folks, again, this is One Martin. If you go to onemartin.com, there's also a Facebook page. This is a 6-part series that they put together, and we couldn't even cover it all in this hour. But I wanted to give you a really good history that this amendment has been well thought out. It really has been researched already through the decades. And it's coming back here, and I think this is a point in time right now that we have seen an unprecedented amount of people moving to Florida. The growth is coming. It's happening. And what are we going to do to protect our Martin County? And I personally believe this rural lifestyle amendment is a very positive change for the county, and I think it's needed. Folks, 50% of a property of a minimum of 1,000 acres is going to be conserved. It's going to be conserved. I couldn't ask for more than that. I think that's wonderful. And Rick, it really stands out to me too that you can keep farming it, and that's so important as well. So we only have a minute here, but we have had Rick Hartman, Rick Melchiori, both from Juan Martin, and you're also with the Becker Development Group that's talking about Atlantic Fields. But this is coming up for vote at the next commission meeting on June 21st. Folks, if you support it, they really need to hear your voices. The commissioners need to hear from you. And Rick, do you have anything else to add?
No, just thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely my pleasure. And
Likewise,
Rick as
just
well.
really appreciate the opportunity to be able to come up here and kind of talk about this.
I absolutely my pleasure. Again, we had Becker Holdings, Tom Hurley, and Rick here in the studio back in April. So if you go back in my archives, you can also watch that show about the project. But folks, June 21st, Martin County Commission will be voting on this, and very important to hear your voice. Let's conserve Martin County. 50% of this land will be preserved in conservation or agriculture. And I will see you again next week. But again, Rick, thank you so much, and appreciate you tuning in. OneMartin.com.